Over the past 5 years, the Brazilian natural gas market has seen significant progress, with a new legal framework that has encouraged competitiveness and attracted the interest of large consumers to the regulated market. However, several inefficiencies and infrastructure bottlenecks still prevent a large portion of domestically produced gas from actually being used, and national prices remain much higher than those practiced in other parts of the world. What still needs to be done to unlock this reality, and how do large consumers perceive the potential of this market? I'm Marcos Mortari, the editor of the publication Argus Brazil Gas Markets, and my guest today on Market Talks podcast is Lucas Boacnin, Business Development Manager at Argus. Welcome, Lucas.
Thank you very much, Marcos.
Lucas, since the approval of the new legal framework, the Brazilian gas market has made important advances in its opening process. This has resulted in significant increase in the number of authorized trading companies and importers, as well as consumers in the free market. How do different participants view the current moment in the market?
Well, Marcos, the market has been evolving since the past 3-4 years, and more recently with broader engagement of players into the so-called open markets. We have been seeing that there is a different gas market in Brazil with different dynamics. And what we perceive right now is that we have basically two markets. One market that is pretty much indexed to external indexes such as oil markets, international benchmarks for gas markets. So we have this other market, the internal gas market in Brazil, the so-called open markets, where participants trade only on a flat price, and this market reacts pretty much to the supply and demand of the market. And what Argus is trying to do right now is to bring more transparency into this market by investigating the creation of a local index for the Brazilian market. So, Marcos, how this new index for the Brazilian gas market works?
Well, Lucas, that's a good question. Although somewhere between 60 and 70% of all natural gas supplied in Brazil is produced domestically, pricing in the captive market is still strongly linked to international indexes, as you mentioned. As the market has evolved, large consumers have intensified their demand for natural gas pricing based on the Brazilian fundamentals themselves. So Argus, as a result, launched its first price assessed indicator for Brazil's spot market. This initiative has been very welcomed by market participants across different segments of the gas value chain, as consumers, producers, traders, and transporters. So now we have a new price for gas markets that is delivered to our subscribers here at Argus. Initially, it started referring to the pure molecule price, that is in Portuguese what we say the PM, the price of the molecule. It considered concluded deals, bids and offers among market participants with a minimum volume of 40 cubic feet and delivery windows up to 90 days.
So, Marcos, you have an eye on all the developments that have been going around the world more recently, and you have been watching closely the behavior of this new price. How do these events that are happening in the Middle East translate into the Brazilian gas market, or do they not translate to the Brazilian gas market? And how can you explain what's happening on the Brazilian market right now?
Well, it will depend on how long the disruption in international markets lasts. The current assessment for most market participants we have spoken with is that the effects of the conflict are likely to be limited in Brazil, unlike in other parts of the world. Although a large share of gas supply contracts in Brazil are linked to Brent and Henry Hub, the impacts tend to be gradual and milder, since the price used in formulas are based on 2 or 3 months average. On the other hand, LNG imports would be more exposed, as major global buyers look for alternatives to Middle Eastern supply following logistical challenges in the Strait of Hormuz. Brazilian natural gas imports vary significantly from year to year. In the specific case of LNG, the pace of international purchases fluctuates according to domestic supply and demand conditions, thermoelectric dispatch, hydroelectric reservoir levels, and arbitrage conditions for the import product. However, imports typically accelerate in the second half of the year when rainfall decreases across many parts of the country and thermal power plants are used more frequently to supply electricity. But the war is obviously not the only factor on the market's radar. What other drivers could affect medium and long-term fundamentals in your view, Lucas?
In my view, the Brazilian market for gas is pretty much regulated and is undergoing deregulations and new regulations, such as the implementation of the biomethane and discussions undergoing regarding the auction of reserve capacity for thermoelectric power. It is very important to have a reliable source where you can read about it, read analysis, and understand how the prices are behaving. And I believe that Argos Brazil Gas Markets is an essential report for you to understand how markets are evolving and what's happening on the gas markets legislation right now. And it's important to highlight that we have local events here in Brazil. In mid-May, we will have a workshop dedicated to the natural gas market during the Rio Crude conference, where we will gather market participants from all around Latin America, including Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, and other players interested on discussing the Brazilian market and learning about the new trends on regulation and on the price behavior of the market.
Sounds great, Lucas. Thank you very much for your time and your sharing your thoughts on Market Talks podcast. And thank you everyone who followed us in this episode. See you next time.